dive into some NFL conversation with Geoff Mosher here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. You can hear him Thursday nights, Mosher, McMullen, Krause on 97.3 ESPN. Check out at Geoff Mosher NFL for his Inside the Birds podcast and other ventures that you can catch Geoff. We'll get into in a bit. What's going on, Moshe?
How's it going there, Mike? What's going on?
All is well. All is well. Carson Wentz is back. The Eagles are 2-1. You know, for them to be 2-1 playing the way they are with all the weapons that they're lacking and a chance to go 3-1 this weekend, I guess you got to call it a success. But when you look at the team as is, how much longer can they keep this up?
You know, it's a great question. And if you think about it in a bigger picture, Mike, it almost feels like a very similar start to last year, right? In that the first game of the year obviously was that big Redskins game. It was a divisional game. Washington had 5 straight wins there. There felt like there was a lot at stake in year 2 of Doug Pederson and Carson Wentz. And there was a lot into that game, much like there was a lot into that season opener Thursday night against the Falcons. That's not a division game, but it was a kind of a little bit of a revenge rivalry game with what happened in the NFC divisional playoffs. And then last year, you go week 2, they go to Kansas City. You know, they lose a game in which Doug just kind of abandons the run. And this year, they go on the road to Tampa, and they lose a game in which Doug abandons the tight ends and goes with 3 wide when clearly it wasn't a strength. And then they come home, and last year they win a really tight game against the Giants on week 3, Elliott's field goal. And here they win a pretty tight game and come up with a big sack on 4th down with Andrew Luck threatening to go ahead. So to answer your question and just to use history or last year as precedent and maybe a parallel, I think with everything the Eagles have endured so far, with all the injuries, had to kind of, navigate past and not having Carson for the first 2 games, to be 2-1 now is, I would say, a pretty good thing for them. And yes, they're making mistakes. Yes, they're penalty plagued. Yes, they have to do a lot. But I kind of feel like now is the time to kind of for them to start their launching point like it was last year after that Jake Elliott field goal, starting a big streak for them. I'm not saying they're going to win 9 games in a row, but obviously you have a banged-up Tennessee team that you're going to face this weekend with playing 2 quarterbacks. And, I think the Eagles will be favored, and they have more talent, and they might even get 2 running backs back and maybe even Alshon. Yeah. So they've got to get a little healthier. I think that'll help clean up some of the errors that they've been making, but I do see them as in a good spot now at 2-1 with Carson looking pretty good, and now is time for them to make their move.
Yeah, and I want to get into Carson, and what are some of the things you saw from him that make you feel like confident that they can start to get on a nice run here because, of what he did on Sunday? Were there certain things that he did that say, all right, because he did this, or this, they should be able to start doing X, Y, and Z?
Well, I think there's the obvious stuff and there's the not-so-obvious stuff. The obvious stuff is that he threw very crisply, especially early on, and the athleticism. You saw, moves in the pocket, the old scramble right, scramble left, scramble right play that he made, and then the head-first dive out of bounds on a first-down pickup. Those were some questions. Not necessarily mobility climbing the pocket, but getting outside the pocket, moving laterally with that sleeve that he's wearing, and it didn't look like it was bothering him one bit. And I think the not-so-obvious thing is, and you talk to the players after the game and the coaches, and then even watching tape, you can see just the changes at the line of scrimmage, whether it's, flipping the run one direction to the other, getting the Eagles out of a bad play or a potentially bad play and getting them into a better play and a better case scenario is something that Carson Wentz does as brilliantly as any quarterback in the league. And, the mind is that wasn't under repair while he was out shelved with the, coming back from the knee. And certainly when you just watch him kind of brilliantly orchestrate a game. And look, I mean, Doug put him out there with empty backfield a whole lot, especially right on, which shows a tremendous amount of trust in Carson to get rid of the ball quickly, but also to only have 5-man protections and really be able to read the defense and and dissect it. So, that to me showed that this is the Carson Wentz that we expect to see. He'll continue to get better. I think he got tired as the game wore down, took some hits, obviously. But I thought he passed a lot of tests on that in that first game.
They ran a lot of 3 tight end stuff that I saw anyway, because Perkins, I guess, is technically a tight end. It seems like they were, at least for 1 week, were playing it very safe. And maybe that's because of the lack of weapons, but I saw a lot of 3 tight end stuff out there. Do they need to, if Alshon isn't ready to go, do we see that again, or was that just the game plan to beat this Colts team?
It's a great question. Something I tried to get to the bottom of the other night after the game when I asked players. I asked them specifically if the 12 and 13 personnel was a result of playing a cover 2 team like the Colts, where they leave their safeties deep, which gives you a lot of room across the middle, around the seams for tight ends to work, or was it a response to just being depleted at wide receiver and you just got to put your best playmakers on the field? And the answer I got was a little bit of both. So listen, Dallas Goedert, he caught 7 balls, caught a touchdown. The most impressive thing to me, watching the tape yesterday and a little today, is that his inline blocking wasn't good. It was very, very good, surprisingly good. And I even asked him about it after the game. I said, this knock on you that you're just another tight end coming out of a spread college team that can't block, it seems like it's not accurate. And he said, just because we ran that scheme at South Dakota State doesn't mean I'm not a good blocker. And there were times where he's walling off the defensive end on his own and driving guys back, linebackers back 7-8 yards. You saw that the Eagles ran the ball well out of 2 tight end formations, which means that the defense came out in 3 linebacker-based defense. It's usually harder to run against that, but the Eagles got their running game going. So whether it's the defense or whether it's the lack of playmakers, I don't think Doug Pederson can go forward anymore and just put Dallas Goedert in the game for 10 to 15 snaps or 10 to 15% of the offense. I think the guy's got to play.
Jeff, last week I asked you about what you thought of Doug Pederson's play calling against the Bucs. This week against the Colts, Carson Wentz is going to be the story, obviously, but I thought Doug Pederson won the Eagles that game. I thought his play calling was brilliant. I loved how much he ran the ball, how they used the different running backs with the and Sproles out. So I wanted you to elaborate on that and what you saw from Doug specifically with his play calling on both sides of the ball.
I couldn't agree with you more, Ryan. I thought it really was the difference in a game that was that close. I would say he concerned me a little bit in the second half when he started. Obviously Carson's playing well, and I thought Carson was taking a bit too many hits, and I would have liked to have seen just a little bit less empty, maybe a little more reliance on the run. But then I went through the play-by-play. It's not like he went like 8 or 9 passes in a row or anything like that. I just think that the Colts defensive front did a really good job of, stunting and slanting up front and giving the offensive line some problems. But the opening drive, right? So if you would have figured out, how's Carson going to play, you would probably expect him to start off a little rusty and then kind of get his footing as the game goes on. But it was reverse. He actually started off on fire, and I think that's because Doug threw him out there, no huddle, shotgun, get it out, 2 tight ends, 3 tight ends, and basically said, we're going to keep the Colts on the field. We're not going to let them substitute, and we're going to use our tight ends as both run blockers and pass catchers and, match them up against these, linebackers, and that's a win for us. They got Najee Good starting out there. So they saw that was a win for them, and they were able to basically get Carson Wentz started early and throw that touchdown. And I really think as good as Carson looked, that was all about Doug and his decision to come out, no huddle, empty backfield, up-tempo. It reminded me of Carson's first ever drive against Cleveland Browns, 2 years ago in his first career start.
How much better do you think this offense can look the way it's currently constructed? How much room does Wentz have left to grow still? Obviously, he's not perfect after 9.5 months out, but this is a depleted offense. So basically what I'm asking, how much better can this team offensively get with all the injuries they have and then with Wentz just coming back?
Well, it's got to get better. I mean, and to think, if you think you're adding 2 Pro Bowlers and Jay Ajayi and Alshon Jeffrey when they eventually get back, and then, Darren Sproles, who's, one of the best all-purpose backs in the history of the sport, it's starting to feel like one of those years, though, you may not see all those guys on the field at the same time. We'll have to see. But I think when you get them back, you're just so much more balanced. You're so much more complete. And it gives Carson so much more weaponry. You think about last year and all the times that, there was no 100-yard receiver, right? No 100-yard rusher. It was just such a balanced offense, and that made them very difficult to defend. I think eventually they'll get there. Just got to get these guys healthy.
Geoff Mosher is with us here, talking a little Eagles NFL. And, the running back situation, we debated last week about Ajayi and Sproles being out. I wasn't all that concerned. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that you don't need those guys, but my question really is, what is the the right role for these running backs? You know, like, did you see something from Smallwood that made you say, man, they should probably use him more? Or Clement, we've all been saying they need to use him more. So I still don't think that the running back situation has been cleared up.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny because it's hard to figure out, and I don't think we'll really be able to figure it out for a while. I mean, if you think about the fact that after this year, Jay Ajayi might leave in free agency. Wendell Smallwood made this team in part because of the injuries that were going on, and Pumphrey not being able to make the team, and Adams not being ready. So I think we have to kind of get used to the idea that the Eagles, gone are the days of the Wilberts and the Shadys and the Ricky Waterses and the Brian Westbrook. This might just be a committee thing for Doug and Deuce Staley for as long as they're running the show. It seems strange. I'm not 100% convinced yet that that's the way it's going to be, but it surely seems like in 2.5 years now, you can go back to Doug's first year when he had Ryan Matthews and Sproles and somebody else I'm probably forgetting that he was, interspersing carries from. I keep wondering if they're just looking for somebody to step up and be that guy. But there are games, like this past one where both Clement and Smallwood look good, and you think that one of them is going to really outshine the other and become that guy, and it's just not going to be the case. They're probably going to monitor Jay Ajayi the whole year because of his knee injury. So I just think that this thing is going to be a committee approach for, maybe until they discover a guy that they finally feel comfortable giving 20 to 25 carries a game. I thought Clement could be that guy, but right now they just don't seem ready to do that yet, and they seem very comfortable with and listen, a big part of Doug's success is being able to change formations, have different guys who can do the same thing in it to keep the defense guessing. I think he just likes that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that there's a right answer of this guy's the best guy for them. Like, I don't know, like, if you were to say there's a guy that gets 15 to 20 carries, which guy is it? I don't know that guy exists. I think it's kind of a week-to-week proposition, which maybe is why I wasn't all that concerned when Jay Ajayi and Sproles were out. I'm thinking, well, there's two other guys that I like what they do too.
Yeah, that is their depth is their advantage, and certainly Josh Adams. I told you guys last week I thought if he did play, it would probably be on first and second down only because you can't trust a guy like that and let's pick up. And that's exactly, he got 5 carries and 4 were first down, I think, and 1 was second down. But it is interesting if you think about their draft philosophy for the last few years. There have been a bunch of running backs that they have done a lot of homework on, especially this past draft. They were out Ronald Jones, they were checking out Darius Geis. I mean, it almost seemed like they were going to take a guy in the first round. And even 2 years ago, there were some running backs that everybody thought the Eagles might seize upon early in the draft, and they didn't. They wound up getting Pumphrey in the 4th round instead of a couple other guys like Kareem Hunt and Kamara, who people thought the Eagles did put a lot of attention in. So maybe they really are looking for that guy, and they just haven't been that guy yet. So instead, they just make do with what they have.
Yep, and you mentioned, obviously, Goddard, the tight end spot. They went to the tight end, I think, 12 or 13 times. They only went to the wideout 7 times. Aguilar, I think, had 5, and Matthews, I think, had 2. He caught 2. Do you anticipate Matthews having a bigger role? And did you notice whether Matthews was lined up more outside or inside? Because I thought on the key play when they went to Nelson on that 3rd down and 9, he was lined up in the slot, and Matthews was outside. Was that normal for most of the day, did you notice in your film study?
What I mostly noticed is that Jordan Matthews lined up as an outside receiver.
Yeah.
Like, that was a good observation by you. And that's very telltale, potentially. First, it may mean that they just wanted to get Nelson in the slot for this particular matchup, and that because Jordan Matthews, who has played the slot his entire life, had only practiced 3 days, they knew he wasn't going to be a part of the game plan. My theory on that is Jordan was basically out there to be a decoy and to take a cornerback or a safety out of a certain lane to leave a one-on-one matchup for somebody else. Because, how much could you have expected from him with just a few days of practice? Even with knowing the playbook and everything, it's still, conditioning and all that factor. So I thought that was really interesting. And going forward, we'll have to, when Alshon gets healthy, I think everybody thinks that what they're going to do is put Alshon on one side and Nelson on the other and put Jordan Matthews in the slot. And I'm not so sure about that. Remember, this team, Jordan was out there, and this team first stuck with Marcus Wheaton and then brought back Kamar Aiken and then brought in Jordan Matthews. So I'm not so sure I think we all learned last year that this team is best when Nelson Aguilar is in the spot, and he brings a lot more explosion. And so it makes more sense to do that and keep different guys on the outside.
I agree with my concern with Nelson was moving him out of his comfort spot may, mess with him a little bit. And the question, I guess, like you mentioned, the one guy we haven't mentioned is Shelton Gibson. Now, he had a nice preseason. He had some big plays. I'm assuming they don't trust him.
Well, I'll tell you why they don't. You remember the great touchdown? I think we might have talked about this last week. The great touchdown that Aguilar caught at the end of the game last week in Tampa, Nick Foles, probably his best pass. That was almost ruined by Shelton Gibson because he ran a route that was so close to Aguilar's route that the guy covering Gibson, I think Justin Evans was it, almost leaped up, if you remember, and almost broke that pass up. That ball should have never been – that defender, I should say, should have never been close to that ball. He rounded a route instead of running a very sharp, quick out to take the cornerback with him. And mistakes like those, the Eagles, got the touchdown, but I'm sure Corey Unlin was not Corey Unlin, the wide receivers coach from North Carolina, the guy Gunther. I'm sure that they were bringing that up in the meetings that you almost ruined a touchdown that we absolutely had to have. And there have been some other, I guess, mistakes or miscues by Shelton Gibson so far. So when you show that you're not reliable and you show that you're not running precise routes and you're not doing what you're supposed to do, you're not going to get on the field. Right. At this point, with how depleted they are, they have to put players on the field that they know can be reliable and come through for them.
Geoff, on the defensive side of the ball, I want your thoughts on this team inside the 20s. I know I'm crazy. Maybe let me know I'm crazy or if I have any validity to this. When they're not in the red zone, I feel like there's just always a potential with this Eagles defense to give up that big play through 3 games. Now, what do you see from the defensive side of things inside the 20s? Where can they be better? Or is this just who they are, that they will bend, but they will never break?
It's funny. I asked Malcolm Jenkins that after the game why they're so good in the red zone specifically, and he said that they just don't panic and they're comfortable. And I kind of asked him why, and he almost tiptoed on what I was getting at. And I think my theory is that you have a secondary built on brawn over finesse. Your only speed guy is Ronald Darby. Jalen Mills is a physical corner who's slow, and Malcolm's getting up there in age, and Rodney McLeod's also getting up there a little bit. Those guys are hard hitters. They can cover in the slot, but they're not speedy guys. So between the 20s is when the other team gets a chance to put the ball in the air a lot. And when they do, they usually target Jalen Mills, and a lot of times they're successful on those targets. But when you get into the red zone, you can't put the ball in the air very long. So you got to make quick throws, you're in tight spaces, you're bunched up, and that's where I think their physicality and the body sizes of the Eagles' defensive backs works to their advantage. They defend those short, quick routes well. They come in that dime. They get Corey Graham in there sometimes on tight ends, and they're really good at short space defense and, of course, getting pressure out front in those situations to help make the quarterbacks make that early throw. But, between the 20s, you've seen Tampa Bay, you've seen Atlanta, and even a little bit of Indianapolis. They max protect. They bring in 2 tight ends to stave off that 4-man rush. They give themselves a little time, and they put the ball in the air, and it's either a completion or a penalty on Mills. So that's why I think it's easier to move the ball on the Eagles between the 20s than it is when you get in the red zone.
You mentioned him, and I want you to elaborate more. Jalen Mills has been everyone's favorite guy to absolutely bash, especially on Twitter. So what have you seen from Jalen Mills on your film study?
Same thing. I mean, again, I don't know if they win that game without his contributions against the Colts in the red zone. He came up with a couple of not just pass breakups, but he also had a few tackles on some, swing passes to the flats that he made that if that guy breaks that tackle, he's in the end zone. So he plays well in those situations. But obviously you saw 2 flags on him. He gets he doesn't turn around very well. And so on an underthrown pass, and boy, we could spend another show just talking about Andrew Luck and really not being there back yet with that shoulder. But a lot of Andrew Luck's deep balls were underthrown. And so when the receiver turns around to come back to the ball, and Jalen doesn't, Jalen's got to has his hands on the guy, and he gets called for it. So he just, it's just never been his strong point, tracking the ball in the air, turning around in coverage, and that's why he gets flagged. Even when it looks like it's not his fault, he's still there and he's got his hands on the guy.
Yeah. which you can't do at all in this league anymore. I mean, anything. Because I thought, for the most part, I thought Mills played pretty good. Even the plays that he gets called on, I mean, the league is so ticky-tack anymore. I mean, if you're just even breathing on the guy, he's going to get a call. But let me ask you about, I don't know how much you've zoned in on or watched Sidney Jones. I mean, this is a guy that, much like Derek Barnett, I mean, Barnett was a first-round pick, but because he's not like the number 1 or 2 pick, you kind of sometimes forget that he was a high draft pick, and you're seeing his dividends. Jones would have been a top 15 pick, right? I mean, this guy's special.
Yes, he would have been great physical corner, speed. I mean, it's hard to find that combination of speed, physicality, press man coverage. And, listen, they like him in the slot because they know that he can also, he can read his run keys and make a tackle.
Yeah.
He plays physical. He's exactly what Jim Schwartz loves.
Does he like it in the slot?
I think right now he just likes being on the field after what he's been through. He's not complained one iota about being in the slot.
And I'm not suggesting that I think he was either. I'm just asking you.
No, the question you have to ask yourselves is this, though. All right, before I get that, there was a couple of – he has made some rookie mistakes. He nearly gave up a touchdown to Eric Ebron because he forgot to cover him, but then was able to close – quickly enough to make sure that the pass didn't get there. But, if Luck had seen it sooner, that would have been a TD. But regardless, the question you have to ask yourself is, that Sidney Jones, with that speed, with that physicality, he's clearly going to be a better outside corner than Jalen Mills at some point. Maybe he's not now because he's making too many rookie mistakes. But when does the team acknowledge this and make that move? And how many more penalties or deep passes does Jalen have to give up for that to happen? It's a good question.
Yeah. I think on the field, the one area that is a concern, it would be at safety if one of those guys got hurt. Rodney McLeod, I guess, walked at practice today, but when he went out, Corey Graham is in, and Corey's a veteran, but if he has to play full-time, that's an area that would be interesting to see how they would handle that.
Agree. You also have your other West Virginia guy, Rasul Douglas, who's played some safety in his career. At least at West Virginia he did. And another guy who could potentially play that role, I guess, if he had to. I mean, he hasn't yet, but he does get in there on the outside corner. He's a physical player, and he can get his hands on the ball.
All right, Tennessee's tricky, man. They'll make the game ugly for you, no question about that, right?
Yeah, but I mean, this is the Eagles, so I mean, it's like a battle of who can make a game uglier.
It's going to be interesting. They just signed Austin Davis as a possible quarterback, and he might actually have to play in the game on Sunday. So keep our eye on that. Geoff Mosher. Geoff, tell the people out there how they can read your Eagles content.
Yeah, subscribe to my Patreon page. It's all comprehensive, in-depth Eagles coverage. It's Patreon/Geoff Mosher. It's only $1.99 for a month, so that's like 6 cents a day. You get no pop-up ads, no banner ads, no freezing pages. It gets emailed straight to you. I write every single day, once or twice a day. A lot of tape breakdown, a lot of analysis, stuff that you wouldn't get from the regurgitated quotes that you see in other outlets and TV and things like that. A lot of really in-depth, comprehensive coverage. And for every 100 subscribers I get, I'm donating to the Wounded Warrior Project. So you get great Eagles coverage, and you also support a really great cause in the process.
Yeah, make sure
Patreon.com/Geoff Mosher.
Yep, Patreon.com/Geoff Mosher. You can find him on Twitter at Geoff Mosher NFL. So if you like our conversation, go ahead and give him a follow there, and Patreon.com/Geoff Mosher and his Inside the Birds podcast. You can find more information about that as well on Twitter at Geoff Mosher NFL. All right, pal. Thanks.
Appreciate it, guys. Have a good one.